Yeah. Hi, my name is Linda Collins, and I'm here today to be talking to you about flying foxes that have recently arrived in Adelaide, and I've been working with flying foxes for the past 33 years.
Thank you very much. So we'll jump on air very soon.
Yeah, it's nearly half my life.
Yeah, wow. Well, first we'll just start off with an intro about yourself in a few minutes, how you got involved in it, where you started with the bats, the flying foxes, how you got into it, what sparked your interest, and then we'll go from there.
Okay.
Thank you for tuning in this afternoon. We've got Linda from Fauna Rescue South Australia joining us to talk about flying foxes, otherwise known as bats. Welcome.
Yes. Thank you.
How are you?
Good.
That's good. Look, I'm so glad you're here this afternoon. We need to get some, we were saying knowledge is power. We need to understand these flying foxes and bats, and they have been vilified in various media outlets and platforms, and we really need to understand a lot more about them. But before we get into that, can you just give us a brief intro about yourself and how you got involved in this topic, in bats, flying foxes?
Okay, I was first introduced to them in 1988, and I raised my first baby flying fox. And anybody who's raised a baby flying fox will realise once you've worked with them, you will always work with them. They're a highly intelligent animal. They're extremely affectionate, very social, which is why they live in very large colonies. But I think the thing that really endeared me to them was their high level of intelligence. They're very smart animals. And so I've been working mostly over the last 33 years on behaviour. So I know the animals quite intimately.
So what is it about them? What makes them so emotional and intelligent? What traits do they have?
Well, one of the things is they've got a very defined social structure. One of the other things that I find very endearing about them is they have an incredible respect for age. So even though the males may be getting older and the females may be getting older, there's no... they remain at the top of the hierarchy until they actually die. Flying foxes are not physically aggressive to each other. They're verbally aggressive. They can scream and yell at each other if you get too close, but they're not a physically aggressive animal. And they've got a lot of very human traits about them. I mean, even raising their young, they have bottles, dummies, nappies. They get wrapped like a baby. So they're very endearing. Something most people wouldn't think about.
Yeah, well, I was just saying to you before we started that there's a few in our area. I'm at Glenelg East, and there's a few there, and I go for a walk every night, and I hear them. They're all, it's about 8, 9 o'clock at night. Obviously, it's dark. That's when they're out, being nocturnal, and they're really fascinating. They've got a sort of high-pitched squeak about them. I thought, what's going on? Are they agitated? Is that just them communicating? I thought, I want to know more about them.
Well, that is their communication. They actually have a very high pitch to their communication, so it often sounds aggressive when in fact it's not. It's just the way they do communicate. They have a massive language. There's over 40 different sounds that they make that have a corresponding answer. So they have this communication between each other, and at night, so they live in the camp during the day, which is in the Botanic Park. And then at night they will fly out within 5 to 50 kilometre radius of that colony, so all the way around Adelaide. They're in search of native blossoms. That's what they're pollen and nectar feeders. And when you get a whole lot of them in a single tree, obviously food is very important, so there's a lot of arguing. And certainly when they first arrive, as you would see them at 9 o'clock, there's a lot of arguing going on about which is the best spot to feed.
Okay. Now, I've noticed they slip because it's sort of like this palm tree, and the palms are sort of hanging over, and they go to grab on and they slip, and then they go to grab on again. Well, I mean, is there a tree that, like in the Botanic Gardens, obviously the trees are a better grip?
Palm trees, of course, they've got those fronds and they're slippery.
Yeah.
So they do have trouble. They often get caught in the fronds of a palm tree, which can actually slice their toes. So they have to be very careful when they're landing in those. But obviously in the eucalypt trees and the different pine trees that they roost in the colony, they have no problems, no.
So apparently, well, you were just telling me that there's 22,000, you counted 22,000 flying foxes in the Botanic Gardens. You were there last night.
Yes.
How long does that take?
Oh, 20 minutes.
How many people?
We have 8 streams, so the colony flies out in streams. We have 8 streams. We have 2 people at every stream. And yeah, when they leave the colony, they all leave together. It just, because there's 22,000 of them in there, it just takes them about 20 minutes to leave. They fly in all different directions because they are in fact feeding all over Adelaide. Anything where there's a flowering gum, they also eat native fruits like figs. And anybody who has fig trees in their backyard, they love figs, and also mulberries. And a lot of people have mulberry trees.
And I was reading that they pollinate and disperse the seeds of peaches, cloves and bananas as well.
No.
No, not these ones.
No.
Oh, I must have been talking about those other bats that you said.
Peaches, they don't. Their diet is native. They're not really attracted to commercial fruits. The only time that they will go to commercial fruits is if there's no native food available. So they will go to the orchards if there's nothing else. But unfortunately, commercial fruits are not nutritionally viable to them. They couldn't survive on commercial fruits for very long. Don't have enough protein, and they require a high level of protein in their diet. So they'll only go to your backyard fruit trees and things like that if they are actually very hungry.
Okay.
Yeah.
And can you just clarify for us which species of bats eat mosquitoes? Because I was reading that we need these type of bats to clean up the mosquitoes, and if we didn't have these bats, we would be in trouble. Exactly.
In the bat family, there's 2 subspecies. You've got your flying foxes, which are your really large bats, and then you've got your micro bats, which are your tiny. A micro bat will sit in the palm of your hand. They're insect feeders. They find their food by echolocation, and often people have heard about the echolocation of bats. They roost during the day in hollows of trees or in caves, and if hollows are scarce, they will go into people's roofs. So they're your insect eaters. They're the ones that you need to keep the population of insects down. Flying foxes live in camps in the canopy of our trees. They don't echolocate. They find their food by sight and smell.
So they can see.
Yeah, yes. All bats can see. That blind as a bat. It's just that the food that the microbats eat is moving. So all insects are flying. So they need that echolocation to be able to keep tracking the insect until they can actually grab it and eat it.
That's amazing.
Yeah. But the flying foxes, they're pollen and nectar feeders, so they need sight and smell.
How many microbats do we have in Adelaide?
Oh, in Adelaide, you're asking me about Adelaide.
Well, anyway, Australia.
I think they have about 10 different species of microbats
Right,
here.
so we've got a few around.
Yeah. And I mean, worldwide, there are 1,100 different species of bats, and they make up 1/4 of our land mammals, are all bat species. So there's a lot of them about. Unfortunately, there are very few that are not endangered.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Mm.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah. The grey-headed flying fox here in South Australia, the reason, and many people ask me this question, why are they here? They did not evolve in South Australia, and our environment doesn't require a grey-headed flying fox to be here. But unfortunately, through their natural range, which is the east coast of Australia, there's been so much land clearing, especially in the last 10 years. Between 2012 and 2015, 400 hectares of vegetation was removed from southeast Queensland. Now, southeast Queensland used to be the prime winter feeding area for the grey-headed flying fox. It's gone. So in 2010, after 2 years of starvation on the east coast, they began moving. They moved north, they went west into New South Wales, and they came south. So I think Victoria had 6 colonies. They've now got 25. And of course, they made their way all the way over to Adelaide. Our colony is one of the biggest now. And even though they don't have an ecological role in South Australia, the survival of the species itself, these animals are very important. They have become a very important colony in preserving the numbers of grey-headed flying foxes left.
Mm. And so they adjusted to the different temperatures and the climate, okay?
That was the problem. The reason that grey-headed flying foxes weren't west in New South Wales, weren't right up north in Queensland, and weren't south in Victoria and South Australia was climate. Out west, it's very cold. And yet they're staying out there all year now, all year round. In Adelaide, of course, we have heat. The summers, we lose a lot of our colony in the summertime. In 2019, we lost 14,000 of them through heat. But, you know, the driving force for any animal is food. So they've had to go into these areas that really aren't that suited for them simply because they've got a food resource for them. So they're now having to contend with those other conditions that are impacting on their ability to reproduce.
So what's the perfect climate for their body temperature? They're just a sort of humid...
New South Wales, they used to, traditionally, they were within 150 kilometres of the coast. That was as far inland as they came, and they were all along. They used to go from Bundaberg down to just over the border into Victoria. There was one camp there. That was their traditional range. That's completely altered now, and that's just in search for food.
Yeah. So what's their lifespan?
Oh, in the wild, they can live anywhere from 15 to 18 years. Currently, we have a captive female who's actually 29. So they can live much longer in a captive environment. Obviously, it's less stressful. But, yeah, they'll live between 15 and 18 years is what we estimate.
How many captive?
Oh, over the years, people have, before we had lyssavirus, we used to use the flying foxes who couldn't be released back into the wild. We would use them for public relations work. And we'd go around to the schools and community groups, and we'd do talks on the flying foxes, and they would be able to see one up close. And when they weren't working for their PR work, they were living in large aviaries in a social group.
Right.
We don't have too many of those anymore, simply because we can't do that type of public relations work with the animals. People have a fear.
Yeah. But how did you sort of present them in those spaces? In a cage, on your shoulder?
Oh no, we just held them.
Oh, so they don't. Yeah. It was that.
Like I told you, they're very affectionate
and smart. They learned. They, what their role was.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And these were normally hand-reared babies that, for some reason, couldn't be released. They couldn't fly. They had something wrong with them. Because normally when we hand-rear, we release them back into the wild. But occasionally you get some that can't be. So they would go into a social group where they could still be flying foxes, but then we would be able to bring them out and use them for talks, and people could pat them and get up really close and personal. As I said, we can't do that anymore.
Yes.
But it was a lovely way of introducing people to an animal that, since childhood, people have been afraid of them, vampires and the whole thing.
The way they're
so,
portrayed in movies,
exactly,
blood-sucking, vampire movies.
There are vampire bats, but not in Australia.
Yeah, and what do? They do suck blood of what?
Of other animals. Cattle,
animals.
horses,
Right.
chooks. When the bird is roosting in a tree at night, it's a tiny little bat. It's only about 35 grams. Runs along and just takes a little bit of blood.
Mosquitoes take blood.
Exactly. And to a horse, a tiny little 30-gram bat would seem like a mosquito.
Exactly. Let's dispel just a few of the myths, or the main myths of flying foxes, if we can, because I think that's pretty important about the diseases and rabies. And I don't know, but I've heard that they're droppings. They're when they do their business, it's sort of black and tar-like, and it's someone said if your dog licks it, it's bad, they can die, this and that, and rabies and diseases. Let's just quickly, well, not quickly, but in your own time, if we can dispel a few of those myths, please.
Well, just for those people who have dogs, flying foxes are vegetarians, so they only have a vegetarian diet of pollen, nectar and native fruits. So the feces is actually very tasty to dogs. But you cannot, there's only one disease that can be transmitted from a bat to a human, and that's Australian bat lyssavirus. Now, it is a rabies-like virus. If you get the virus, they are rabies symptoms. However, there is a vaccination that you can get if you are, and the only way the virus can be transmitted, you have to be bitten or scratched by a bat. And that's microbats and flying foxes both carry the virus, but the only way it can be transmitted, it's transmitted through saliva. So unless you're bitten or scratched, you can't get it. And so their feces, urine, you cannot catch anything from their defecation. So so long as you don't touch them and you don't get bitten or scratched. But even if you do get bitten or scratched, you wash the wound very quickly, you put something on it like betadine, you go straight to your doctor, and you will go through a series of vaccinations. All of the people who work with flying foxes, I'm vaccinated. So against lyssavirus. So that is the only virus you can get. The Hendra virus is transmitted to horses, not humans. Now, if the horse gets Hendra, they can give it to the human, but we have no Hendra so far in South Australia. It seems to be more in northern New South Wales and southeast Queensland. There have been no other cases in southern New South Wales, Victoria, or South Australia.
And just on that point, just curious, how would a human catch it from a horse?
If they did, it's from saliva.
Yeah.
The horse would be sick. There's only been a couple of people that have died of Hendra, and they were one of them was a horse trainer, which was the first person to die, and also a vet. What happens is they go to treat the sick horse. It's has a lot of mucus as a result of a respiratory problem. And when they come in contact with the mucus, But anybody now who works with horses knows that if they're ill, regardless of what the illness is, you take the precaution of wearing gloves and wearing appropriate paraphernalia to make sure you don't come in contact. Yeah,
that's right. And just a few more points before we finish off. So they live in trees and caves. I've heard that they can enter. Well, you said they can live in the houses. Is that common?
Yes, very. Yes.
In our roofs.
Oh, yes. Yeah, very common.
It's just like birds do. They make a little nest. We wouldn't know they're there.
No. Well, no. Most people don't. No, they don't. They're up in the roofs, in the eaves.
We're talking about the microbats.
Microbats. Only the microbats. Yes.
They're in the eaves.
Yes, because they go into torpor during the day. In order to conserve energy, their heart rate lowers and they become very cold and they go into torpor. So you don't hear them or see them. But occasionally, what happens is one of them will get into the house, and somebody will see it, fluttering around, and we simply get a call. People can ring Fauna Rescue. We have a bat hotline. And we will help them get it out of the house just by opening windows, or we will have a rescuer come and remove it from the house for them. As far as flying foxes go, the time that you need to contact Fauna Rescue is when you see them not in the colony. Now, every flying fox goes back to the colony for the day. So after their night feeding, they fly back to Botanic Park where their colony is. So if you see any bat, any flying fox not in Botanic Park during the day, it's usually in trouble.
During the day?
Yes.
But we wouldn't see it flying, we'll just see it hanging?
Yes. Yeah, they won't fly during the day. No.
So the ones I'm seeing in my area, where do they live?
At Botanic Garden.
Really? So they go back?
Yeah. Yeah, oh yes. They live in the colony. In Botanic Park. Right, it's just right outside the zoo if anybody wants to go and see them. In all the tall trees there.
We all saw it during Wareham Adelaide.
Yes, that's right. Yes, yeah. Well, that's where they live. So they go out at night. They fly out just on dusk. They do their feeding trips throughout Adelaide. And then they all come back in the morning. So you'll never see a fly. People sometimes think that because they're in their trees at night, that they're also there in the day. But if they go out in the day, they're not there. Some people think they build nests in their trees. They don't nest. They're placental mammals. They give birth the same as us. They're pregnant for 6 months. They only produce one baby a year. And they care for their young for 6 months. So they go back to the colony to have every morning. So any bat that's in your trees during the day, it's in trouble, ring Fauna Rescue.
What could be wrong? Just sick?
It could be sick, it could have been injured.
Yeah.
Sometimes they get hit by cars, but they get into a tree. Sometimes they're electrocuted on the power lines, but they haven't died. They're just very badly damaged. And then you find them hanging in a tree. A lot of people do find them dead as well. And we collect all of the bodies. So even if you find a dead flying fox, we use it for research purposes. And so if you do see a dead bat, always give us a call. We will get somebody to come and pick it up. Yeah.
So the flying foxes live in colonies in Botanic Gardens, but you mentioned that they can live in our eaves. They're the microbats.
They're the microbats,
and they don't go anywhere, back to a colony. They just stay there.
They have their little roost areas.
Do they live with? Are they like? In
They're
a family,
they're a group animal as well.
Yeah. So they won't be on their own.
No. So if you've got one in your roof, you've probably got a few. But they're of no consequence to you at all.
So it's like the same as having little birds.
Yeah,
We've had birds in our eaves. And
the really good thing about them is they're going to fly out all around your house at night and eat all your insects.
Yeah.
So if anybody who's got microbats anywhere in their shed or in the eaves in the roof of their house have actually got an animal that's going to actually help them.
Well, just talking about mosquitoes, I did speak to actually someone a couple of years ago about them, and he said mosquitoes are the most dangerous animal, if you want to term it like that, on the planet.
Yes.
We should be more worried about mosquitoes.
Yes.
We all know that they transmit numerous amount of viruses and diseases. So,
and one of
if the microbats are eating the mosquitoes, yes, that's what we want.
Yeah. In fact, in many agricultural areas where they've reduced the populations to such ineffective numbers, they're actually putting out bat boxes, trying to encourage them back again, because they're classified as nature's non-chemical insect repellent. Yeah.
Exactly.
So,
one last thing: how many offspring does a female have in a year? I've heard that they don't reproduce a lot.
One.
One.
She can only, as I said, she's pregnant for 6 months, and she cares for the young for 6 months. Their body is such that they cannot really successfully rear twins.
Right, I was going to ask that.
Yeah.
So it's one at a time.
Yeah.
Only one.
Yeah.
Gee, so interesting. Isn't
So
it?
it's very hard for them to, when they do have problems where their numbers are decreasing, it's very hard for the population to recover from something
Yeah,
like that
sounds
because
like
bats are the slowest reproducing mammals for their size. So it's very hard for them to recover once their population goes beyond a certain level.
Mm.
Yeah.
And just some little features that they have here. I was looking at their superpowers, you know, all these little different things. They've got razor sharp teeth and, you know, they can hear through echo. They've got a super noise. Anything else we need to know before we finish off about them, these little creatures?
The little microbats, as I said, they're very important. But the flying foxes are what's known as a keystone species.
Mm.
And a keystone species means a species that other animals rely on. So, for instance, you always hear that slogan that says about the koalas, no trees, no me. For flying foxes, it's no me, no trees. They're the prime pollinators of our eucalypt forests because they need to move the genetic material away from the parent tree. And they're the only ones that will do it the distance required. So what happens if the genetic material stays too close to the parent tree, you get weaknesses in the new trees that are growing. And eventually, over a period of time, you get dieback. So you think of our forests as the lungs of the earth. Well, the flying foxes are the physicians and healers of the trees. That's how they're referred to.
Well, Linda, thank you so much for sharing all that with us. It's going to make us look at them differently. I'm going to look at them differently now when I see them at night. Well, I will admit, when I first saw them, I was with my husband and my dog. I was like, oh, what's that?
Fear.
Oh, it's a bat. And then what? And then I think of all these things that I've been told. I won't go into it, right? We all know. And then I thought, no way. I know I'm wrong here. Let's investigate.
And find out.
That's
yes.
it.
Thank you.
We've got a great way of putting fear into ourselves humans, don't we?
We do.
We hear one little thing, one little myth, and we fly with it.
And like you said, knowledge is power.
That's it.
Yeah.
Linda, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Wonderful.
Yep.
I can't say I'm up with the latest social media. Personally, I prefer the good old-fashioned phone call over Facebook. But that's just an old
Can I?
whinge.
Are you on
Something I do
Facebook?
love is
Yes.
getting used
Oh,
to
because
apps
that will be on
my
Facebook.
smartphone.
Okay.
Like the kids
Check
all
it out.
do the phone.
Can I grab a drink out of the
course.
thing? I just need some water.
Yeah, go for it. Go for it.
And I can let myself out?
Yeah, I'll come out too.
Oh, you're right.
That's fine. If you could sign out as well.
Okay.
Cheers.
Save a lot